Good evening and Happy New Year. It being 7:01 and a quorum present, I'm going to call this first Plymouth Planning Board meeting of 2025 to order. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, this meeting will be conducted via remote and in-person participation. Members of the public who wish to participate in the meeting may do so by Zoom. The Zoom link is available on the town meeting website. Public comment in this meeting will be pursuant to the public comment policy established by this board and also available on the town meeting website. First on our agenda this evening, we have minutes, the minutes from November 13, 2024. Do I have any questions, comments, changes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Discussion? Seeing none, all members present, raise your hand. Abstentions?
I have to abstain.
And as we continue, I want to start by also welcoming our newest board member, Joe Higgins. Joe was appointed by a joint meeting of the Planning Board and Select Board last evening, and consistent with his personality, he is hard at work already. He was sworn in right there at the meeting by our very diligent town clerk, who just happened to be walking by at the time.
Thank you.
So, Joe, welcome, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on our agenda, we have covenants, plans, and releases. First, B437, Pine Hills LLC, modified definitive subdivision plan entitled Station Drive Plan of Land on land located on Station Drive, map 77D, lot A-339. It's the entitlement to endorsement. Questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Mr. Bennett.
So this is a subdivision modification, correct?
This is the subdivision modification. It's the verification of what we have already voted on. Correct, Mr. Hartman?
Correct. So what happens is modification, subdivisions require approval to the planning board. Once it's approved, there's a 20-day appeal period. So the plans will sit for 20 days at least, at minimum, until we know that there's no appeal, and then they're endorsed. So,
Mr. Hartman, this is, or do we have the opportunity to impose conditions upon this approval at this time? Or is the,
so Tim just talked to me on the side beforehand, and so these are, just so we know, these are very minor modifications to the right-of-way that already exists. But what Tim has said a number of times is wanting to see proper monumentation out there. So based on what Tim was saying, I think what he would recommend, and we're fine with it, I actually just talked with Deb Sedaris to give her a heads up, is that you vote to endorse the plan, but we don't release the plan until they come in with revised monumentation that actually shows so this shows existing monumentation, but not the proposed. And so that would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hartman.
Now, so there wouldn't be, we won't sign the plan because it's going to be a revised plan. So it would just be a vote to authorize signatures once the bounds are shown, and then once they come in with the revised plan, we'll call you and you can come in and sign the plans.
Okay.
so that condition would be in accordance with Article 4 of the subdivision regulations, Section 412, monuments. And just for the record, I'll read the beginning of it. Monuments shall be installed at all street intersections, at all points of change in direction or curvature of streets, and at other points where, in the opinion of the board, permanent monuments are necessary. So I don't think the full text of the regulation needs to be included, but.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion then with that condition.
Motion to endorse with the conditions we just discussed.
Thank you. Motion from Mr. Grandy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Donaldson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Next, we have B426, Little Hios Hills LLC, bond release. Mr. Hartman?
Thank you. All the work has been done in this subdivision. We're holding security to make sure the work is done. It's all been done. It's all inspected by our peer review consultants. So again, the work is complete. We're just recommending you release that money.
Thank you. Questions from members of the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
A motion to release the bond. Do I have a second?
I second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call for a vote. All in favor? Unanimous. We have no Form A plans, so I will move on to announcements. There are 2 remaining live master plan listening sessions for January. January 16th at the Manamet Elementary School and January 29th at the Red Brook Great Room. Both of those will start at 6 p.m. As with all of the others, everyone is welcome and encouraged to attend. On a legal note today, the State Supreme Judicial Court came down with a ruling regarding the challenge to the MBTA Communities Law. The court found that the law itself was constitutional and enforceable. However, they also found that there were some procedural flaws in the way that the regulations were rolled out. So the law stands, but the procedure for the rollout has to be redone. The governor issued some initial comments indicating that she intends to proceed with implementing the MBTA Communities Law and enforcing its regulations. So the only question that remains is, will the regulations be changed during the course of the rollout process, which involves some additional public comment and notifications? So the only thing I can say about this is, stay tuned.
And if I could, so 7 months ago, we filed with the state our compliance requirements, and we have not heard back from them. So technically, our deadline was the end of December to make sure that we were in compliance, but 7 months have gone by and we have not heard from them yet whether we meet their compliance or not. We believe we do, but they have not ruled on that yet.
Always good to see the government on top of things. Moving on to our hearings and presentations. I'm going to start with the public hearing for annual town meeting on zoning article to rezone lots 11B, 26A, and 27 on Assessor's Map 102, located off of Commerce Way and Cherry Street, from light industrial to mixed commerce, as well as to amend associated sections, provisions, definitions, tables, charts, and procedures pertaining thereto, or take any other action relative thereto. The Planning Board will hold a public hearing in the 1820 Courtroom, Town Hall, 26 Court Street, Plymouth, Massachusetts, on Wednesday, January 8, 2025, at 7:05 p.m. to see if the town will vote to amend its zoning bylaw, official zoning map of the town of Plymouth, by changing the designation of lots 11B, 26A, and 27 on Assessor's Map 102, located off Commerce Way and Cherry Street, from light industrial district to mixed commerce district, as well as to amend associated sections, provisions, definitions, table, charts, and procedures pertaining thereto, or take any other action relative thereto. Text, map, and other information may be inspected at the Department of Planning and Development. Any person interested and desiring to be heard on this request should appear at the time and place designated. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and welcome, Mr. Higgins. My name is Bill Sims. I'm representing T.L. Edwards Incorporated, the petitioner in this particular matter. Before I present, I think it's probably appropriate to have Mr. Hartman present what he has for the board, and then I will jump in with some details and further information that is particularly relevant.
Mr. Hartman.
Thank you. So this is a project and a piece of property that I have talked to the current owner about a number of times. It looks like the family is no longer interested in the current use, which is T.L. Edwards. It's a sand and gravel processing facility. So if we look at the map that's up on the screen, just to orient people, and then I'm going to show something on aerial too. So this is, and I always love this because I think it's 20 years old, but I'm still calling it the new Route 44. So this is the new Route 44 that goes through the town. This is Commerce Way heading out towards Kingston. So if you're coming from Colony Place, this is Colony Place here, you'd be going on Commerce Way, going over Route 44, you would pass the processing facility here. There's a small convenience store car wash on this site. The Amazon facility is back over here. The new car dealership is here. If you take a left, it would take you up to the Kingston Mall. So the site we're talking about is a couple of out pieces that have been excluded that are owned by the town of Kingston, but the property owned by T.L. Edwards. And if we could go to my screen, got to switch mouses. I'm going to do a share screen, I hope. And I just thought it would be good to do a visual here. So if we could do my screen, please. So again, kind of orienting you where we are. This is up in the top right with my mouse. It's a little jerky there, is the Kingston Mall. This is Route 3 here, headed south. This is the new Route 44. And so this is the site we're talking about here is Colony Place. And again, I think it's worth it to look at what the facility is now. So it's not a gravel operation. What they do is they truck material in and do gravel processing. They take the material, and you can see that there are a number of sorting facilities here where the material is sorted. So we have one of our gateways to the community, and when you come in from Route 44, you get to see these very large piles of gravel, sand, and other debris. As you come in, there's a staging area here for the trucks and scales. So again, not kind of the ideal entranceway to the town of Plymouth that we'd like to see. So, what the proposal here is to rezone this from light industrial to mixed commerce. And in your packet, you have, what I did was just took the use table and only side by side showed only light industrial and mixed commerce. Really, the biggest difference here between light industrial and mixed commerce is that mixed commerce allows for retail. Now, I think many people, including myself, feel that maybe there's enough retail already in the town of Plymouth, but I think this is a little different on this site. This zone still preserves the ability to have those industrial, high-tech uses that already could happen in a light industrial district, but it gives them one more option for retail. And I'll let Attorney Sims talk a little more about that if he wants. In my opinion, when we look at this, I think there are three options. One is we allow this zoning to go through, and even if we have retail uses here, I would argue they're less impact. I don't know how many trucks come in and out of this site, but it's pretty significant. So that truck traffic would eliminate. The blight of what you see there for that use would be eliminated. The downside is it might be retail. But again, I think if we don't do this, we guarantee one of two other options. One is that that processing facility stays there and continues to operate, or B, this turns into yet again another 40B like we've seen so many other commercial properties. So for those reasons, staff supports this, and we recommend the planning board support this at town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Mr. Simmons, proceed.
I've got a couple of photographs of the site for anybody who is not familiar. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what this is, just in case. We have some stuff here that's not as new that I do, but I'll share this with everybody just so that the right side up. I don't want to be too confused with the T.L. Edwards site, which is across the street, which is the concrete processing facility. This is the, oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing here. It's not. So just so that everybody knows what the existing conditions are, these are some photos of the site on Cherry/Commerce Way, existing, and I can talk briefly about. Everybody see that up there?
Yep.
Assuming everybody's been by there, but I don't think they've been down the roadway. Anyway, so just a brief historical.
We need the microphone back.
The microphone's right here.
Should just use the handheld.
Put it back in.
Well, I don't want to do like a lounge act here, you know. All right. Okay, so just a brief historical introduction here. So TL Edwards Incorporated is owned solely by a gentleman named Terry Edwards. He's owned this company since, vocals okay? Okay, I'm sorry. 1969. He's got 7 kids that are in the business, and they own a major processing and construction plant in Avon. So his basic concept at this point in time, he's 80 years old. He wants to close down this particular site, consolidate the operations with the Avon plant, and he does not want to sell it to somebody with a similar business. So hence, here we are with a proposal for town meeting to rezone it to MC, mixed commerce. It's currently LI, light industrial, allowed use in the area. Mixed commerce would be by town meeting, obviously. And what the company does at this site, as Lee may have mentioned, is they process materials such as, whatever comes in and reduce it to loam, gravel, road base, sand, and the like. And there are multiple truckloads of materials coming in and out of there every day. It is allowed use in the area, but these photos show you sort of a kind of concept of what goes on there in addition to the truckloads. So this was purchased from TL Landers about 12 years ago or so. So the plan right now is to propose to town meeting to move this particular parcel of land from the LI to the MC zone. And in that particular move, if allowed, the project, the land will be sold. He will consolidate the project with his Avon project and no longer have that particular operation on Cherry/Commerce Way there. Given the nature of the surrounding businesses and the commerce in this area, we feel this is probably the most appropriate and attractive use of the property. We're looking at the retail operations on both sides of Commerce Way and oh, okay, good. There's been a number of discussions with potential suitors and proposed buyers for this project. He will not sell it to another operation of the same ilk, hence the reason for the rezoning, so that won't happen. And like I said, we've been engaged in discussions with a number of commercial/retail businesses that are very attracted to the site. It'll be extremely simpatico with the other businesses in the area. The positives of the rezoning article would include the elimination of the high volume of daily truckloads of gravel, sand, and similar materials, as we all can see. And I can't really imagine, a better, more attractive and location appropriate than the transformation of this site. And one last item, if you're not aware, and which I got educated on during this process, is that pursuant to the Massachusetts Code of Regulations, 850 CMR 58.2, manufacturing does not pay personal property taxes for their equipment. There's north of about $10 million of equipment in that area. So once this business is closed, relocated, and if rezoned appropriately to MC, whatever goes in there is going to be producing some significant tax revenue to this town. Unlike right now, where he pays, obviously, property taxes, but the personal property taxes on all that equipment is exempt. So, given that, I will entertain any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. Anything further from staff?
Hey, you read my mind. Just two other things to add. So I will point out this isn't a Zone 2 for aquifer protection. I think those are the Kingston wells that it's a Zone 2. But again, I would argue that any use is probably better for our aquifer than the existing use. Also, this is on town water and town sewer, so many of the uses, and the biggest issue you have is with those kinds of discharges, and that will all be through municipal water system. So that was all.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it back to the board for questions. Mr. Donaldson.
You vaguely mentioned about the business across the street. You said that's a concrete business, and your who owns that business is not the same company. Is that correct?
So if you're going down,
I'm familiar with the area. I just want to know.
okay, so
yeah.
heading down Commerce, Cherry, right there. On the right side is this particular one. On the left side is the concrete business, which is owned by Mr. Edwards.
Okay, so then what is does he have any plans for that concrete business across the street?
Too soon. I don't, right now, no. Right now, he's just talking about the processing plant. On the right side, if you're heading towards the west, yes.
Okay, so there may be a high possibility, a request for the same zoning for the property across the street.
I can't honestly answer that, Mr. Donaldson, because that subject has not been broached with me by the client. Right now, it's this particular one, which is which will easily consolidate with the major facility in Avon, and that's what he's.
And Lee, what is the property across the street? What is that zoned at? Did you know off your head?
Light
Is it
industrial.
Light industrial as
Yeah.
well?
There are actually two facilities over there. One's a concrete batching plant, and the other's a bituminous asphalt plant. So there are actually two plants there. But yeah, it's light industrial.
Okay. And my next question is how long or what is the time frame of possibly this switch over to the Avon location? Is that going to be in conjunction with the approval of the zoning, or while the zoning's going on? Is there any kind of...
So we are entertaining discussions with a number of suitors for that spot, but it can't happen. He will not sell it to somebody with a similar industry. So until we get through potential approval, a town meeting in April, there will be no affirmative action taken towards, that sale. But once we get the approval by town meeting for the rezoning to MC from LI, then things will probably ramp up pretty quick. I can't give you a time frame, but he definitely wants to consolidate that operation with the one in Avon. That's his goal.
Okay.
He's 80 years old. He's trying to move it along. So that's our time frame in terms of, just generalities. I can't give you specifics when we get the actual buyer for the spot, but if we get it changed, then he's going to be in a position where his operation will not be allowed in that particular location. So it's going to happen pretty
Right.
quick.
And that brings me to that's the reason for the question. So if by the time town meeting comes around and the zoning is changed, then it's going to change the operation or the use of that.
No, so this,
No? Or is
this
it-
will
how
actually,
does
this
that
is
work?
actually a pre-existing non-conforming use already.
Okay.
This facility occurred long before zoning existed in Plymouth. And so if the zoning changes, it just would become, I'd have to look, but I believe it's not allowed in this zone, so it would become a non-conforming use. Pre-existing would be allowed to continue and operate for as long as it wants. if that was the preference. So the zoning change itself doesn't compel them to abandon the use.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. Mr. Grandy?
Yes, through the chair. It was mentioned that if we left the zoning the way it is currently, there was a good chance of possibly a hostile 40B. So by changing the zoning, is that going to diminish the possibility of a 40B being on the property, if we're going to use that as an example?
So I believe the property owner, when he's spoken, has talked to me. He's indicated that he has no interest in selling this for residential development, and that they want to move forward with this, with something commercial. So, but the zoning change in itself does not guarantee that. If for some reason none of that goes through, it could still be a 40B. But again, when the property owner approached us and said, I'd like to do this, I look at this and say, okay, we're adding retail, but we're still preserving almost all the other industrial uses, and we're going to give him one more option to do something other than just a straightforward 40B, but this doesn't guarantee that that won't happen.
That's right, I just want to make that kind of clear, because it was kind of insinuated that there wouldn't be a 40B if the zoning was changed, but there is the potential for that to happen, regardless of the zoning being changed. As far as this site is concerned, and when we look at if its zoning is changed, are we going to develop the entire site at once? We're not going to do this in a piecemeal, little strip mall, and then a little bank, and then maybe a donut shop, or something along those lines. Are we going to have like a master plan, not a full master plan, but a plan of this piece of property that it's going to be developed, fully developed, and not developed in pieces of pie, so to speak?
Fair question, Mr. Grandy, but it's kind of early in the process to lock my client into what's going to happen there. It's going to be sold to a developer, somebody who's going to bring in a retail industry that's appropriate for the MC zone. I mean, without disclosing too many client confirmation discussions, there have been a number of people that are very interested in this, none of which are strip mall people. They're more of the large-scale box kind of operations, the Costco kind of places. So I can't predict what'll happen there, but it will not be what it is now. I can tell you that. And you know, whatever operation
Okay.
decides to come in.
I understand what
They'll
you're
have to
trying
come
to say.
before, you know, planning and zoning for whatever.
It's a little
they do.
early, I understand.
Yeah, so I
right?
can't.
But I would mention to your client, tell your client that this is how at least one member of the planning board feels as far as if the zoning is voted by town meeting to be changed on this piece of property, not to do it piecemeal.
I would say that the discussions we have are not in line with those comments. It is more of a large-scale, not strip mall type of operation. But we can't control when it gets sold, but it'll be an allowed use, and if it's not an allowed use, it'll be by special permit. But I don't think my client wants to just unload it for the purpose of unloading it. He's not that type of person. So he's focused on getting the right type of client and business in there. So I can just give you those kind of positives as best I can at this point.
Yeah. My next question is, as we know, looking at the piles of material on the piece of property, how long would it take to remove those piles of materials? Because you're basically doing a sand and gravel operation. If you're removing all that at once, explicitly to remove it from the site, there would have to be some type of plan put into place to protect town roads, state roads, et cetera, in the process. But that's a discussion for another day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Grandy. Mr. Bennett?
So my question actually is probably more for Mr. Hartman. And I'm looking at Mass Mapper now. I'm seeing that almost the entirety of the site, except for all of the frontage on Commerce Way, is encumbered by the Zone 2s, as you mentioned. Can you just educate us a little bit on the restrictions that the Zone 2s would place upon any future uses?
As it is already, there are extensive, if you look at the Aquifer Protection Bylaw, there are a number of prohibited uses, storage of chemicals, storage of petroleum products, hazardous materials, a number of parking spaces may trigger a special permit. So there's a pretty lengthy list of prohibited uses and uses that might require a special permit to able to go in here.
Okay, so something like, say, a car dealership
So-
would be permittable, I think, there?
So when we did the car dealership across the way, their maintenance facility is, the line for aquifer protection there goes through the property. So all their maintenance and their car washes on the other side of aquifer protection. I would say that those types of uses would be a real challenge. If it's straight just selling cars, fine, but if there's maintenance with it, that would be a very difficult thing to permit on this site.
Okay, but as was mentioned, say a big box type store, a BJ's, a Costco, whatever, there's, pick one of the ones that are taking over the world now. Doesn't seem as though there would be too much restriction other than hazardous chemicals being
Yeah,
can
and
sold.
definitely there'd be a special permit for the ZBA for a review for aquifer protection. I think something of that magnitude would almost guarantee to trigger some special permit criteria for review. There's requirements for monitoring wells, there's requirements for how you store any material that might be in excess of some number too. But again, I think if it's a Costco or a big box store of that size, or Amazon, some of those types of uses, that will definitely trigger a special permit review with additional protections and requirements through the special permit process.
Understood. So in general, we could pretty much rule out any kind of manufacturing.
I don't know. I mean, that's hard to say. We'd have to look. It depends on what they're manufacturing. There's a lot of clean manufacturing that goes on too, so I'm not sure. I mean, but those uses are allowed now.
Right. Yeah, it does seem to me to be very conducive to a transportation-oriented use, given
if
the
that's the-
proximity
yeah, and
to
if
the
that's-
highway.
If that's the case, they probably should just keep the zone as it is, but.
So I'm just trying to dig a little bit into the why here. Just, it's a fairly big step to encumber your property without having a plan for it, so I'm sure we'll see something soon should this go through. So I don't think I have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but Mr. Grandy asked the one question I had relative to the material.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. So I'm going to follow up a little bit on that material question. So obviously, as indicated, there are both processing towers and structures there right now, as well as material. Is the intention to remove those from the site if the site is sold? Or is the site being sold with those materials there?
That's, again, a very good question. But I think, as I suggested earlier, the concept here is to consolidate that entire operation with the Avon operation. So, yes, I would suggest that whether those towers are destroyed, relocated, or whatever, it is whatever they have there in terms of materials, infrastructure, is going to be relocated to Avon. And what happens after that with the new buyer, we have no control. It's too soon. But yes, I mean, this is the concept. He's trying to relocate and consolidate that operation with the much larger scale Avon project. So,
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sims. Any further questions from the board? Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Is there anyone in the room wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing no one, is there anyone on Zoom who wishes to speak on this matter?
If you're on Zoom and like to speak, raise your hand. Well, I see nobody looking to speak.
Okay, thank you. At this point then, do we move to close the public hearing?
Close the public comment part of the hearing.
I have a motion to close public comment. Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chair.
Motion second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of closing public comment? It is unanimous. Public comment on this matter is now closed. So the issue before us, again, is whether we are making a recommendation to town meeting. This is a citizen's petition, so we're not advancing the petition. It's simply a matter of a recommendation. Is that correct, Mr. Hartman? And that's called upon us because we provide our guidance with respect to any zoning changes. So the recommendation would be to support the change from the light industrial to mixed commerce district with the changes side by side as provided in our packet, indicating that in essence the major difference is the allowance of retail subject to the special permit conditions associated with certain types of uses or certain additional uses that are allowed by special permit, primarily under the institutional category of mixed commerce, such as hospitals, congregate housing, assisted living facilities, elderly housing. So that is the issue before us. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
And if I could just point out, the retail is a special permit use, so it's not an allowed use. So even with this, they still have to go to the ZBA, probably for aquifer protection and for any type of retail.
Okay, so this proposed change doesn't really create any automatic uses that are immediately conducive to the site that we would have to, so there would still be those protections afforded from the special
I would
permit
look through
process.
the whole use table, but I don't believe anything of significance.
The only real major changes I see that are formally allowed, not allowed, that are allowed are things like day camp, cultural and recreational facility. That's kind of the only ones, so I think if someone wanted to open a day camp there, we'd be thrilled beyond belief. So, I'll entertain a motion from members of the board.
Motion to, how do we phrase it? Motion to recommend.
Yeah,
That
motion.
town meeting approve?
Motion to recommend to town, motion for favorable recommendation to town meeting.
So made.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote, all in favor? It is unanimous. Good luck at town meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members.
Next on our agenda is ZBA 4147, 280 Plimpton Road, Town of Plymouth, Cemetery Division. Special permit required per 205.2 rural residential and use table to allow a cemetery.
Okay, you got it. I'm good. Good evening. My name is Jim Jackson. I'm a civil engineer with Park Corporation. We're representing the town of Plymouth, the cemetery division. Also on the Zoom meeting is Ray Dunitz. He's the principal of Ray Dunitz Landscape Architecture, and then also Diane McGuire with the Cemetery Commission. So they're available to answer questions also. So we're here requesting a special permit for cemetery use in the RR zone. In 1971, the town purchased 37 acres on Plimpton Road for construction of a new cemetery. In 2019, Ray Dunitz prepared a master plan for the site for cemetery use, and it includes approximately 20,000 burial sites to be built over phases. Right now, we have designed for the first phase, which is about 1,500 burial plots. You can see on the cover, that shows the white is the outline of the site. Oh, okay, great. Oh, awesome. Okay, yeah, so here is the 37-acre site on Route 80, Plimpton Road. And then, can I flip through the plans on this? Yep. Go through. So here's one of the landscape, this is the grading plan, but it shows the site. So the first phase is on the eastern end of the site that we just showed on the cover. It will have a access road, paved road, looping through the site. We have an area up by Plimpton Road for a future operations and maintenance facility building. Not part of this phase, but in the future that will be built. We're preserving an area in the middle here, a historic site area will be preserved and not touched in the project. And then most of the burial plots are here on the east side in this area. We do have a columbarium area right off the road here for cremations. And then there's also a veterans area over here with a memorial and some more burial plots for veterans. For the stormwater, we're using mainly country drainage, so stormwater will go by swales to, we have proposing two bioretention areas, one here and then one over on this end of the site. So as I said, this is the first phase, but eventually, the whole 37-acre site will be developed for cemetery use. And I think that covers everything. If you have any questions, I'm available, and also Diane McGuire is available on the Zoom meeting.
Thank you. Staff?
Thank you. So why this is a special permit, I have no idea. I'm not sure. I was a little stunned when we first came up with this and found out that a cemetery requires a special permit. My guess is it had more to do with private, for-profit cemeteries than it did for town ones. But nevertheless, it's a requirement, so they're here before you. So I really can't think of a use that has less impact on the community than a cemetery. And there's been a need. I myself have been working for years on trying to find locations for additional capacity. The cemetery is pretty much at capacity now. So this addresses, and again, was planned since the 70s. What they're showing you here is phase one. I don't see a reason why they should ever have to come back for a new special permit each time. So our report and the way we've drafted this is to recommend that they approve the entire project. And if they come back in another 5-10 years for phase two, that it's done informally through the ZBA and not for a new filing for the next phase. And again, from my position, this is just a very low impact use. I'd love to have one in my backyard, great open space. And again, I don't know why it's a special permit, but we recommend that you recommend to the ZBA that the special permit be granted.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to public comment first this time. Is there anyone in the room wishing to be heard on this matter? Seeing no one. Is there anyone on Zoom wishing to be heard on this matter?
So if you'd like to speak, let me know or raise your hand. It looks like we're good.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the board to questions. Mr. Bennett?
No questions. I've seen the presentation on the cemetery before the selectmen as well, and absolutely in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Grandy?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Donaldson?
I am also question-free.
Thank you, Mr. Donaldson. I can say that I have also seen this presentation on 2 occasions between the Select Board and also through the Open Space Committee, and I know you're working with the Open Space Committee as well regarding access and being able to utilize this as potential walking space as well, and I appreciate the efforts that are being made by the Cemetery Department in trying to accommodate that. So I have no further questions either. Any further discussion from members of the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Recommend approval to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Motion to recommend, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All in favor? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Good luck at the ZBA. Thank you. Next on our agenda this evening, we have ZBA 4146, 205 Taylor Avenue, McGreco Inc., special permit required per 203-9.c to alter a pre-existing non-conforming use to convert congregate housing to a two-family dwelling, per 203-7.d to waive required off-street parking setback and screening, and per 203-7.f.2 to waive required parking area width. Good evening, Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Politan. For the record, Rob D'Ambrosio with D'Ambrosio Law here in Plymouth. Hi, Mr. Higgins. Welcome. Nice to meet you. So I'm here tonight on behalf of Meg Ryko. I've got Rick Veo, Meg Ryko's principal, with me here in the audience. I've got our civil engineer, Mark Flaherty, with us as well. So my game plan here, if it's okay with the board, was just to give a brief overview of the legal relief, and then I could let Rick dive into sort of the details of the proposed project, and then Mark's here to answer any engineering-related concerns. So, as was read into the record here, the existing use on this site is a 17-unit rooming house. So it's certainly non-conforming in the R20 SL district. That's why it's a pre-existing non-conforming use. The zoning permit application was filed to convert this 17-unit rooming house into a two-unit multifamily building, a two-family dwelling. So because it's a pre-existing non-conforming use and because the new use will also be non-conforming, we're here for a special permit. So the special permit application was filed, of course, or the zoning permit rather was filed, and then inspectional services directed us to seek a special permit. So this board is advisory to the zoning board of appeals, which of course you're aware of. Just wanted to point that out. So the first criteria here, 203-9C, and I'll just scroll down. Here it is. So this is the pre-existing non-conforming component, and that language in the bylaw, which of course most or all of you are familiar with, says that a special permit may be granted to alter a pre-existing non-conforming use or structure, provided that the Zoning Board of Appeals determines that it will not constitute a substantive change in use or be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing non-conforming use or structure. So certainly the use will remain residential, and I think this will be a vast improvement to the neighborhood in terms of whether it's more detrimental. I don't think any neighbor, unless there's someone here in the audience maybe, would argue that 2 units is more impactful or detrimental to the neighborhood than 17 units. So that's why we think that this has merit relative to that requirement, relative to the other relief grounds, which is more technical in nature. It's parking. I think it's an acknowledgement, really, that the existing parking, you can see it's a fairly tight lot. The existing parking is quite tight. I think there's only 2 parking spaces and not enough room here, even if you go back to the edge of the structure, to give that typical 20-foot setback that the zoning bylaw requires, or the screening. So there's not much screening there now. There really isn't room for much screening going forward, and there's not enough latitude on the site to push it back within that buffer under 203-7D. So we would need relief technically on that ground. When we talk about parking, one thing I would note, and I think it's on one of these slides here, in terms of the number of spaces, and again, Mark may get into this, or Rick, but the plan provides 4 parking spaces. And just a note on that, because it sometimes is a confusing concept. The grandfathering language in the bylaw talks about how you calculate grandfathered spaces. So again, the existing use with 17 one-bedroom units, 1.3 parking spaces per unit are required. That comes out to 22.1, I believe. I think you round that up. So technically, right now, the current use, there should be 23 parking spaces provided. I believe there's 2. So we're grandfathered to the tune of like 21 parking spaces, which means we technically could provide no parking on site. But be that as it may, the plan is to provide 4 parking spaces, which again is not quite up to what the bylaw calls for, which is 6 for 4-bedroom units, the three spaces per 4-bedroom unit. But again, it's much better than what's there now, and it's far in excess of what's required under that grandfathering calculation. So just to kind of touch upon that, because I know that's not the most straightforward thing in the world. Other than that, again, you know, the footprint is going to remain. The structure is being renovated, not raised. We've got to go to conservation next week to get their buy-in on the project. Other than that, I would note, I guess, that of the 17 units, I believe 16 are vacant now, and the 17th tenant does have a place to go and is expected to be out of there, I think, by month end. So, you know, Mr. Veo actually kind of held off on committing to this project until he knew that all of the residents would have somewhere to go. Pardon me. And it looks like that's now fallen into place. So, again, that's sort of an overview of the relief that is being requested and the legal grounds. And I think Rick would like to give a few words about the sort of particulars of the project and his vision for it if he could. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Good evening. Thanks for having us tonight. I'm Rick Veo from Megrico. Rob has sort of pointed out most of this. I think I'll just add some color to that. So as you see, it's a 17-unit rooming house, congregate living. At the present time, none of the residents who were living there as their residents are there. They've all been relocated. The one person who will still be there for another 30 days was a staff member. And to be extremely clear, they've all been relocated to much, much, much nicer facility. This is a facility that, frankly, shouldn't have been open. I mean, like most of these rooming houses are. They're not in good condition. The right services aren't there. There's not enough money to maintain them. You have water leaks. You have potential mold issues. You know, the list goes on and on. So when we came across this, we saw an opportunity to, one, help improve the neighborhood, improve the beach area, and two, and maybe more importantly, be the catalyst that moves people on to more modern facilities that are capable of providing services that they need and all appropriate amenities, which we think we've done. You may have seen this come on and off the agenda, sort of, and driving Mr. Hartman out of his mind and staff over the last several weeks, but that was because we kept backing away whenever there was any pushback to not properly move the residents. We were like, well, we're out. We're not, you know, we're not interested in pursuing this. So that all said, we think this is a major improvement to the neighborhood. I'll go with the minor things first, like Rob mentioned, the parking. Not enough parking now by any means with staff and visitors and whatnot. The new use will be a couple short, but far improved from what's there. Landscaping will be improved as we will be removing a lot of, you know, ramps and propane tanks and generators and all things of that nature to make the site a lot more navigable. The actual building itself, as you can see, and no. Sorry. Just start it again. Well, just right on this page is fine. Here we go. As you can see, it's not a very attractive building. We plan to change that dramatically. We could have gone, the building's already sprinklered, we could have gone with a concept of 4 units or that type of thing, but we thought that 2 units, keep the parking down, make these, you know, very nice was the way to go. I think as I step forward to very rudimentary architecturals, but you can see, I think you get the idea that we would be adding dual entrances, all new windows, trim and siding details. The entire building will be stripped down on the outside, inside, down to studs and sort of reconceived. The only real impact to the footprint is the deck reconfiguration on the back to provide some deck space for both units. Other than that, any of the exterior footprint is unchanged. So that, I guess, is everything I would add from my perspective. You know, we feel it's a great project, a large improvement to the neighborhood, and as I said, maybe more importantly, I think it placed the residents that were there in better facilities, which was important. I can certainly answer any questions now, later, or we can add, I don't know if, Mark, do you have anything to add at this point? We have been, we do have letters back from fire, from DPW. There'll be a few DPW comments, but they're basically, I'll say, insignificant and easy for us to satisfy. We don't have any issues with doing any of that. So other than that, we're more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Veo. To staff.
Thank you. So this is a case where we have a boarding house, and again, as Mr. Veo pointed out, we did have a lot of discussion about the existing, that they were veterans who were in this facility, and making sure that whatever was happening here, we weren't displacing those veterans. So Mr. Veo has talked about that. But I would point out that as a boarding house, this could be used, it's not limited to just veterans. So if in the future this type of change doesn't happen, it could remain a boarding house for boarding and not necessarily just veterans. What they're looking to do is take that boarding house with a number of bedrooms, reduce that significantly, create two fairly large but duplexes. So we're going from, I think, a potential for a fairly intensive use. And I would point out, too, that if it was a boarding house that's not necessarily veterans, there could be a real parking issue, too, to just a two-family duplex unit on the property. And on the same footprint, a slightly different change in configuration than the decks to the rear. But again, I think this is a less intensive use and probably better for the neighborhood. So staff is recommending that you recommend favorably to the ZBA on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comment first. Is there anyone in the room wishing to be heard? Seeing no one. Is there anyone online wishing to be heard?
If you're looking to be heard, either show your face or raise your hand. I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay, then I will bring it back to the board. Questions, Mr. Grandy?
I do not have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Donaldson?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bennett?
No questions, a few minor comments. I do want to applaud Mr. Vio's immediate addressing of my primary question, having read the packet of what is happening to the residents. I think you've definitely addressed that, and it sounds like they've gone to better residences. I've been in that building myself. I did find it somewhat of in dismal condition a few years ago, so happy to see that they've been moved on to other places. I did also review the packet. The engineering comments look minimal, so I think you're in good shape, and I'm definitely in favor of the project.
Just say for the record that, again, normally when people appear in front of us with non-conforming pre-existing uses, they tend to be wanting to go from a less intensive to a more intensive use. This is the reverse in an area that is, again, noted for our summer community and is a very busy area. As a boarding house, this has the potential to create a great deal of traffic and inconvenience to the residents in the area. This particular type of change is the exact opposite. This does what you've said, Mr. Veo, which is to enhance the neighborhood with a much more attractive building, far more appropriate to the nature of the use. So I have no questions for you as well, but thank you for your efforts in this matter. Any further comments from members of the board? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve ZBA 4146 Taylor Ave.
I have a motion to recommend approval to the ZBA. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Grandy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? It is unanimous. Good luck at the
Thank you,
ZBA.
gentlemen.
Final matter on our agenda this evening is the informal 2 Commerce Way ZBA special permit number 2946.
If I could just start off quickly. This came before the board previously, so what happened was, going back a number of years, a special permit was granted. This is Commerce Way, this is where the market basket is, and it had broad parameters for what you could do. So the special permit allowed for a certain square footage, it allowed for a gas station, but it said as you come in with individual pieces, and we've seen this with the market basket, with the different banks that have come in, that they come to this board informally for an informal review to provide a recommendation to the zoning board, and then the zoning board reviews the site plan informally as a condition of the original special permit. So the use is allowed, the use is in place, it's just subject to this board and then ultimately the ZBA finding that the proposed layout is acceptable and you're comfortable with what they're proposing for the layout, not the use. I would point out, too, that the last time this was before the board, there was a concern about intensity of use, and that the consensus was the use being proposed was too intensive for the site. And so what they're back here with is a revised plan that hopefully addresses the concerns that the board had at the last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Rob D'Ambrosio, attorney at law, D'Ambrosio Law here in Plymouth. Lee kind of stole my thunder, so that's okay. Anytime, though, I think he said it well. Again, we're here informally. Ultimately, the ZBA is going to weigh on this as well, but again, this is all done under the auspices of an existing special permit for the development of the larger complex of which this is only a portion. So I've got on my left here Chris York of GPI. I think on the Zoom we've got Rebecca Brown, the 2 project civil engineers. I don't know that we have someone here from Energy North Group. Energy North operates gas stations under the trade name, I think it's a trade name, Hafner's. You may have seen those gas stations. So again, we were here back in April. I think Mr. Bennett and Mr. Higgins weren't here, but I think the rest of the folks on the board were here at that time. And as Lee pointed out, there was some concern about how much was going on the site. So we'll kind of walk through that. But again, to give you an overview, we're here for site plan review. It's a gas station with a car wash and a convenience store. And again, this is part of that planned shopping center, the Cranberry Crescent Shopping Center. So that 1999 special permit that enabled the larger shopping center had these 2 conditions that said basically, like Lee said, come back, show us what it's going to look like, show us where it's going to sit on the site. Not a question of use, more a question of appearance and configuration. So that's why we're here. And again, I think we're scheduled February 3rd to appear before the ZBA. Actually, I take that back. I'm getting my hearings confused. We may not have a date yet for the ZBA. Anyhow, so again, that special permit, asked that we identify the use, the building, the structures, landscaping, parking, lighting, et cetera. I think you've probably seen those materials and walk you through some of that with the presentation here tonight. Again, just to rehash some of what I gave you before. So it's about 2.3 acres. It's currently an undeveloped site. A portion of it is disturbed. I think it was leveled or graded at one time. But again, undeveloped as it sits right now. And our proposal is for the C-store with the coffee shop. I think there's 2 primary changes from what was presented back in April. In April, we had a drive-through for the coffee shop. And that's no longer the case. Now it's just a convenience store. There will be a coffee shop, but no drive-through. And again, we've still got the car wash and the fuel dispensing island as proposed before, but I think that the configuration and traffic flow has been greatly improved, and Rebecca might walk us through kind of why we believe that's the case. So again, I'm not going to go through it. Here's the site. As I mentioned, you got a portion of it that's disturbed. You've got the market basket here, Commerce Way going toward Colony Place in this direction, and then there's Carver Road going back toward town down this way. Again, existing conditions, the aerial is probably a better idea of what's going on here, but this is what we have, a drainage basin and then sort of an untouched graded portion of the site. Here's the site plan that you guys received in your packet, the concept plan. Again, I'll let our engineers give you chapter and verse, but, in a nutshell, here's the car wash, and you've got 2 entrances here. Again, the queuing for the car wash would be like this to sort of take it away from the way it functioned previously. Again, I'll let Rebecca kind of go through it. I don't want to steal her thunder. This is what it looked like previously, so she can kind of walk you through how that's changed, if she can maybe take control and toggle back and forth. Again, I think the only other thing I'd point out, Lee noted that this was previously approved under that master special permit, I'll call it. I think it's worth mentioning, and I touched on it back in April, in 2013, the ZBA did approve a similar project, but in some respects it was larger. So again, in 2013, there was a proposal for a larger C-store with a car wash and a fuel dispensing island. So again, for what it's worth, this was the layout and configuration that was approved back in 2013. So, we think that this plan that's before you tonight is an immense improvement from what was proposed in 2013, both in terms of circulation and layout. But, just to point out the fact, this is not the first or even the second time that the town's looked at this site since it was conceived. I've got some elevations here. Again, I'll just give you quick visuals here of what we're going to look like with the Hafners. That's the front of this convenience store, the right side, the rear. Again, some elevations of the car wash, which, is not anything architecturally astonishing, but that's the car wash. And then we've got this visual. I think this is as you approach from Commerce Way. Again, there's kind of that bioretention basin, some greenery and some screening. Then we get into the car wash and the convenience store here. So with that said, if I could, I'd like to yield the floor to GPI and let them kind of run you through the plans, maybe talk about how it's changed from what we what we showed you back in April, because again, you had some concerns about the layout, and I think the steering committee did as well. So we've made some improvements, and I'd like to let them take a stab at talking through those. Thanks. So I don't know, does Rebecca want to? I'll let you first.
I'll have Rebecca kind of speak a little bit about the kind of the layout of the site. I can take any questions you have afterwards as well.
All right, great. Can you all hear me okay in the room?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. I think it might be easiest if I share my screen, if that's a possibility, just so that I can more easily toggle back and forth than between the two plans. Yep, it should be all set. All right, so hopefully you are now seeing what was the original plan for the
yes.
site?
Yes.
Okay, so the last time that we met with you, as Rob mentioned, we came in with a site that had a 3,200 square foot convenience store with a coffee shop that had a drive-through use, as well as a car wash and the fueling pumps out in the front of the facility. The big concerns that we heard from the planning board were obviously the amount of activity that would be occurring back behind the convenience store, with essentially 4 drive-through lanes, with the coffee shop drive-through lane, the bypass lane, and then the 2 lanes coming into the car wash tunnel. That would create a lot of activity and congestion back behind the building. The concern was that if queues were to extend beyond the storage area, the drive-through and the car wash entrances into the 2 drive-throughs were immediately adjacent to each other, and if those were to back up, it would back up onto the site, potentially blocking access from Commerce Way and to the vehicle fueling positions. So we have, obviously, with this plan, we have eliminated there we go. So we've eliminated the drive-through use entirely for the coffee shop. And the car wash tunnel has been pushed over towards Commerce Way, further back on the site, which provides a much longer stacking area here that wouldn't interfere with the site circulation. And another concern that we heard was that if someone is coming in off of Carver Road, that there was the potential that they might accidentally go the wrong way into the car wash tunnel with the way that the entrance was aligned directly across from the car wash tunnel. So with this new plan, we have addressed that by reversing the direction, by relocating the car wash tunnel, so that as a car does come in, they would be entering directly into that lane. If someone was coming in from Commerce Way, they would have to make a very hard 180-degree turn to come around towards the car wash tunnel. So it would be very difficult for someone to go in the wrong direction and, into the car wash tunnel. There will be do not enter striping that is proposed here where the car wash tunnel exits onto the site, as well as do not enter signage that would be posted on either side. Another big concern that we heard with this plan previously was that with the drive-through coming through here, that any of the pedestrians parking over in this area would have to walk across that heavy traffic for the drive-through egress. Obviously, by eliminating that egress point here, the pedestrians walking from their vehicles are able to do so on a sidewalk, all the way over unimpeded by vehicular traffic to get into the convenience store. There is also additional parking that's proposed in the rear of the convenience store, which may be mainly used for employees or people who are just visiting the convenience store and not utilizing the fuel pumps in the front. And there is a sidewalk that is provided all the way around to the front of the convenience store to be able to get access into the building. Last thing that we heard was a concern that as pedestrians who are parked in the parking spaces along Carver Road are sort of crossing over to the convenience market, that with the layout of the vehicle fueling positions in the direction that they are laid out, vehicles could easily dart in from either Commerce Way or Carver Road very quickly into those vehicle fueling stations as pedestrians are crossing. So what we've done with the revised plan is by rotating the building, it forces the vehicles as they're coming in to make a turn to enter into those vehicle fueling positions, as well as when they're exiting, they need to make turns exiting, and they would be facing directly at the pedestrians when they're doing that. So it significantly improves the pedestrian safety so that vehicles are able to more easily see them. Pedestrians walking through are not crossing over the vehicle fueling pumps to be able to get up to the convenience market. And I think that was all of the issues that we had from last time and how we have addressed all of them. So if there's specific questions on the traffic circulation, happy to answer those. We did provide a trip generation letter that compares this current proposal to the one that was previously approved back in 2013. During the weekday morning peak hour, it's almost identical trip generation to what was previously approved. And during the PM peak hour and the Saturday midday peak hours, the trip generation does decrease with this current proposal compared to what was previously approved by about 17 to 55 vehicle trips. So it is a fairly decent reduction in trips with this new plan compared to what was previously proposed with a much larger convenience store and three tunnels for the car wash.
Great, thank you very much. Anything further from the proponent?
Now we can take any questions you may have.
Okay, back to staff.
Staff really doesn't have anything to add. This was, reviewed once before, and it was really about intensity, so.
Even though this is an informal, I will ask if there is any public comment. Anyone in the room? Chris? No? Anyone online? Seeing no one, I'll bring it to the board. Mr. Higgins, any questions? And I know you're at some other disadvantage since you didn't sit in the earlier session when we saw the first presentation, but I think we just got a very good comparison.
Yes, if I could ask, and I'm trying to look at the scale here, where it's labeled Commerce Way at the top right, that's the entrance effectively or exit of the Market Basket parking lot, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So the distance from that island that's there, I would describe as an island, if you're making your way out back towards Carver Road to the entrance to where, I guess, the fuel pumps are, and the entrance to this area here, what approximately, is that, from what I see, close to 200 feet, maybe a little less?
Approximately, yeah, I can, hard to tell on this plan, but it's about 200 feet or so.
Okay.
Again, there are two existing, there's a curb cut that's out there now that was built years, as part of the development on both Commerce Way and Carver Road.
And so someone entering, if you're, for example, if you're on Carver Road, you make a right to go into Market Basket, towards Market Basket, so you're heading in the direction of what's labeled Commerce Way. There's someone who enters, would have to make an immediate left into the entrance there, effectively from the roadway there.
So coming
No,
from,
so there's an island that is,
That's
that
what I
extends
would, that,
all
I
the
the
guess
way
curb,
that's
down.
yeah,
what
there's
my
a raised
question
island
was.
there,
I
yep,
can't-
yep.
From this, I'm having a tough time deciphering that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Donaldson?
Rebecca's still.
I,
Can we have the other plan up, please? Thank you.
That might be a little, here you can kind of see that island a little bit, that white, Mr. Higgins is the island, so.
Yeah, I think the problem is just in the drawing, we can see a section of the island, you just can't see
Yeah,
the
yeah.
continuation, but it is there.
It is there, yep, yep.
I just have a comment more than a question. I appreciate you coming back and taking consideration of all of our issues that we had with the site. I do see a much better flow than what was there before, as well as the concerns that we have for safety and pedestrians walking on the site. So I don't have any questions, and I, again, thank you for your time and bringing this back to us with a better view and a better plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
The aerial we just put up, you can see that this is the site right here, and you can see the island extends all the way up, pretty much well past the whole site.
Thank you.
All the way through, all the way up to, all the way up to Carver Road.
Clear from the plan.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, so just on the immediate question, so it looks like, so anyone heading south on Commerce Way won't be able to turn into this site until they pull out onto, is that Plimpton Road? Taylor? Because of that island, right?
Yeah, you can only take, only, oh, go ahead.
So someone
Okay.
traveling south on
No,
Commerce
you know
Way.
what, I had my,
You have to go past the place to turn around and come back to get into it from that.
no, actually, that's not the case. I was thinking British driving rules, I guess. I had the wrong side of the street going there.
Yeah, so right in on Commerce Way, right out onto Commerce Way, and Carver Road is, two ways, left turn in, left turn out.
Right, right.
Right turn in, right turn out.
So to back up to my initial impression here, and I apologize since I wasn't on this case originally, you may be starting over somewhat with me, but it seems, I was actually a bit surprised to hear that this is an improved layout, because this, I'll be blunt, it seems like about 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag. This is a really dense set of uses, 3 uses on, under 2.5 acres. Looking at the plan, it just looks like, and I'm not a traffic engineer, and even though I do drive, I don't claim to be one. like an aisle width of 20 feet, I know is mighty tight. I'm wondering if perhaps those angled spaces in the back, are those proposed for patrons? Or is that like employee parking back there?
It could be either or, you know, it's,
Okay.
you know.
That's
I mean,
a,
tw-
that's a
20
pretty tight aisle.
20,
for-
20 feet is acceptable because they're angled spaces. And generally, if it's a, you know, if you get 90-degree parking, it's, you have at least 24 feet.
Agreed,
So
yeah.
we got 20 for the angled spaces. Out front here, we got
I would
at least
agree with
28.
Mr. Bennett.
Yeah.
That needs to go bigger than 20 to 22.
Well, on
we
angled
can- yeah.
spaces, I don't think that's a problem. If it were 90-degree spaces, I agree with you. The 20 feet's just too tight.
No, we would never go,
My post office has that.
we would never
It's
go
a
narrower
nightmare.
than 24 with the, not, you know, with the perpendicular spaces.
Yeah, it just, and this is just kind of my musings aloud, obviously, you're very intent upon having all three uses there, the car wash and the coffee shop, and I'm not going to pretend to understand the business model, but it seems to me the coffee shop would generate more revenue if it had a drive-through than the car wash would make it worth. Just an observation on my part. Obviously, your client is the one that decides what he wants to propose there. But maybe I just don't wash my car as much as some people. And I do appreciate that you've had a traffic study and that the trip generation is essentially remains the same from the previous iteration, which I would expect. I do see, looking at Google Earth and having looked at the site, that there's an existing detention basin or stormwater management feature that's kind of covers the western, I guess,
There is an existing basin there now. This new proposal, we would ultimately kind of reconfigure what's out there now. 'Cause we're kind of,
Is that
we've ex-
servicing the roadway, or is it part of the...
services, part of the roadway, services our lot, kind of services surrounding, you know, some of the surrounding properties as well. We would ultimately, you know, kind of talking with DPW, we would, you know, reconfigure that basin, keep the same volume, the same elevations, would just kind of reconfigure it into the smaller area on the left-hand side of the property now.
Understood, yes, I have full faith in our engineering department to hold you to the letter of their stormwater management requirements. Another concern that I'm looking at is that once you've committed to that car wash lane, there's no escape, you're buying a car wash. It's like,
Yeah, you got about, you know, got a couple hundred feet going down that lane to, you know, you can kind of duck out at the last minute, go
Yeah,
through
if I-
those
you
8
know.
spaces there, but if you're in the car wash lane, you're getting a car wash.
understood, yeah, that's, I just picture somebody like me maybe realizes all of a sudden that I don't have my wallet and I gotta get out of there, you gotta try to back out, there's just no escape. Perhaps, and it wouldn't surprise me to see that a section along the side of the proposed tunnel car wash got paved as a somewhat of an emergency exit or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can look at. I mean, if, you know, ideally, a lot of car washes try to have a last second, you know, bailout lane. We can, you know, something we can certainly kind of look into.
Yeah, that's, I don't know what the engineering standard is for that.
I don't
I'm
think it's
sure there should be
required. It's just
something.
more of a convenience if it's, you know, if the site allows it.
Yeah. And I noted that the setback to the tunnel car wash, so we're looking for a 19-foot variance on the setback of 40 feet down to 21.
That is correct. We would be looking for a variance on that front setback.
So Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, that would not require an actual variance, it'd be included as part of the special permit approval, right?
Rob, have you looked at that? I have not looked at that.
Sorry, if I misspoke, I apologize.
Yeah, fair enough. No, we'd be looking for that as part of the, just site plan review.
How do you do that without modifying?
Well, I mean, I think that the special permit gives the board's latitude to adopt the plan. I mean, if that's not acceptable to you or the ZBA, we'll take another look at it. But, you know, I think under the auspices of the special permit is what we think you'd have the latitude to grant that.
That's my understanding too, that normally, were it not part of a special permit, it would be a variance. However, a special permit can grant those variances within its approval. But I just wanted to mention that's a pretty significant reduction in setback.
Yep.
I think that given the commercial nature of the street, I wouldn't generally have a problem approving it. Also, can you, the retaining wall around the north and west side of the site, is that a cut section to the site? Is the site below the road, or is that a fill?
It would be a fill.
It'd be a fill, okay, so the site will be above the roadway.
Yeah, so that, if I can scroll to that, that pretty landscape visual. So yeah, kind of, so this is driving up Commerce Way, so the building would be up higher. This is kind of the wall surrounding the perimeter of the property with some pretty arborvitae trees to kind of buffer the wall from view. But the site is higher than,
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Definitely with a commercial site, my general preference would be to see it depressed below the roadway, so it's less of a visual. But the site is the site, and grades are the grades, there's not something
not much we can
really
do
control.
there, yeah.
That, I think those are my comments. Just my general feeling is, wow, you really squeezed a lot in there. I actually give credit to the drafter and the engineer that got all that stuff in there and made it fit and work.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Grandy?
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Bennett stole quite a few of the questions that I had, but I'm going to go through a couple of them again. We talk about the retaining walls. What is the elevation? How high are the retaining walls? And what are they anticipated to be made out of?
At the highest, they're about 10 feet high at the max height, kind of at the corner of the site in here, to where it'd be the highest. So that's why we're proposing the row of arborvitaes or some type of similar shrubbery to kind of give the wall a little bit, hide it a little bit from view and kind of give it a little bit more of a buffer to the public. It's it's about 10 feet high or so at the max.
Yeah, so again, this is an informal review, but I have a couple more questions. I want to get into the angled parking in the back.
Yeah, in terms of the type of wall you had asked, it would
Yes.
probably be kind of a typical block retaining wall,
A what?
like a block retaining wall. They're like 20 feet. They reach like 24-inch high blocks. Just kind
You're
of
not looking like a
stacked up.
straight block building on the back of a building, right? I'm looking at some type of design
Oh,
of
yeah,
a
yeah,
block is
yeah.
what
It's
you're
not-
talking
it's
about.
not gonna- We're not going to have a straight-faced, concrete wall that looks like, garbage. It's going to be a.
Well, I don't
There'll
see
be
the
a-
elevations, and I don't see what it's being made of, so
Well, we
that's
don't-
why I
we-
asked
we-
the question.
We don't have a design
Right.
for the wall at the moment, but it would not be a. It would be a structurally designed, visually appealing retaining wall.
Oh, right, which I would hope would be see through the approval process.
Correct.
The 20-foot space between the angled parking needs to be increased. That's too
Okay.
tight in that section. Okay, now, if I decide to back out of one of those parking spots and head back out to the car wash lane, you should have do not enter across that area and signage to ensure somebody doesn't make that mistake.
Going back. Yep.
Right?
That's it.
The other thing I would like to see incorporated on this plan is striped walkways, even if there's only 4 or 5 spots back there. Let's have a striped walkway that goes over to the sidewalk. The same thing falls true for the parking areas out front. And if I could ask what exactly the loading area is in front of the six parking spots?
Right in. Yeah. That's just.
I see something hashed out, it's called out for loading. Are you parking the, if it was Dunkin' Donuts or whatever donut shop it is, are you parking your 18-wheeler there to offload into the building? Is that what that is?
It would be. It wouldn't be an 18-wheeler. It'd probably just be a smaller vehicle. The big trucks for the gas, for the gas deliveries, those would ultimately park
Right,
up here in the corner where the underground tanks will be proposed and located.
okay, so again, pedestrian hashed out marks from parking areas to the buildings so that the pedestrians are protected. Okay? Have you thought about solar at all? As far as the building is concerned, just a suggestion.
I will ask the client, the applicant. I do not know that answer.
Okay. Your next question is snow storage. Where on this site during a blizzard are you going to store snow? It doesn't show that. The other thing that I think the plan needs to show is show that a vehicle, truck, or fire hydrant apparatus
Correct, yep,
could go around
Yes.
this site.
We-
I don't
yeah. So
see
we-
that in any submission or in these plans whatsoever. So,
It's
to
a
me,
final-
right now, there are still a lot of things that need to be adjusted on the plan. For example, when you go back over to the car wash where it says do it on enter, and you're getting ready to go out and take a right on the Commerce Way, because you have that island all the way across, separating the two lanes of traffic. So you can't take a left out of there. So do you have signage there, no
There will be-
left turns?
There will be, yep, there will be a sign, painted arrow signage.
Yeah, because that could definitely be an issue as far as the design of the site is concerned, right?
Yeah, so, yeah. Final plan would show fire truck access, fire truck apparatus.
Completely
Running
around the site.
the 18-wheeler diesel truck as well.
I would also agree with Mr. Bennett as far as some type of exit lane out of that corner of the car wash area, because somebody may make that mistake and get to that point,
Yeah, understood.
and it happens,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's why we try to.
I'll probably do it tomorrow somewhere, if not tonight.
Well, you shouldn't tonight, it's fresh on your mind.
Okay, trash enclosure area, is that gonna be masonry, fenced in? I can see the gates,
Be
What is-
solid vinyl fencing.
vinyl slat
So,
fencing,
yeah, yeah.
okay? And do you have enough handicap spots?
We do, yes.
Okay. The other thing you really need here is some type of landscape plan,
Yeah.
which,
So we do, I mean, we do
which you
show
don't have.
Oh, sorry.
You have that,
we do
color
have- we
color
have-
rendering, but that's,
We-
is that
yeah.
the landscape
Final-
plan?
Final site design, we would have a full landscape design with plantings and,
So I can jump in on the landscaping. So in April, I think it was either West Plymouth, I think it was West Plymouth that suggested that we beef up the landscaping. So we submitted something, then we came back with more landscaping when we presented to you. Again, we didn't drop it on here because this is sort of a concept plan. We're here for your feedback, so. But again, there is obviously some, but, once we pass muster with the design, like Chris said. No, I mean, we're hopeful that we'd get a recommendation, again, if there's a major issue, we'd like to know about it and maybe come back, but if overall the sentiment is favorable, then, we would forge ahead with landscaping, exactly, drainage design.
Isn't
We
that
need
typically
to,
done here, though? Before it goes to the zone, when are you going to the zoning board?
we do have to go to
May I
the
ask?
zoning board, yes.
So the zoning board has not scheduled this yet. So the only way that could happen is if the applicant said, we want to go ahead without or with a negative recommendation from the planning board, but I don't think that's the case. So it's only going to be scheduled once they come back to the ZBA and say, we're done with our process with the planning board, we're ready to go ahead. So again, I think that we've come up with a fairly lengthy list. I think tonight the best we're going to do is, if you're majority comfortable with what you see, and we can follow up with this list of issues that were raised and have them come back and show us a final plan with all those details.
That I would be happy with.
So unless
If the
there's
board
anything
feels
else a
that way.
board member wants to add to that list, I've been taking notes, and I'm sure they have too, so we have that list.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for answering the questions. Thank you.
I think all of the points have been made. I want to start by first commending you, though, in terms of what you've done in terms of addressing our initial comments. This is a much less intensive use than was originally. Mr. Bennett was surprised by what we've seen. This is pretty consistent with a lot of the other sites that we see in town with gas stations and car washes and convenience stores, and this is certainly the new model. I was a little less concerned about people getting into the car wash lane than some of my fellow board members, but I certainly understand their
and again,
concern.
it's a simple painting of the, painting on the ground or a sign, that's,
Certainly, there are at least 3 other car washes that I have gone to in Plymouth where I think you're under pretty much the same conditions, but nonetheless, I think that if it can be done in escape lane, that would probably be a good thing.
yep.
for me, the biggest issue was along Commerce Way, just making sure that as you've moved the car wash building right adjacent there, that be screened as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the limited amount of screening that I see on this plan wouldn't do it. You've done in terms of your rendering, a very good drawing of the protection that you're talking from the retaining wall, the visual cues from the arborvitae. I'd like to see something similar along Commerce Way.
Sure.
So that a car wash building, which is not going to be the most aesthetic thing, is screened. And again, I appreciate that literally right across Commerce Way, you are looking at the side of the market basket, so it's hardly, you're hardly detracting from the overall nature of the Cranberry Crescent development, but as we're approving something new, we certainly would like to make it as aesthetically
Oh, sure, sure.
palatable for the residents as possible. But above and beyond, I will say that I really do appreciate the exit and entrance ways on this design far better. They limit the crossovers of both traffic and pedestrians significantly, and I think that's a major improvement. So with that, I'll finish, and I guess the question is then, are we going to take a vote, or are we going to?
Yeah, I would recommend you don't. I mean, there's a lot of things we typically see, many of these details. This is kind of, the intent is a final site plan review. So my recommendation is, they have the list, we have the list. Let's get them to give us all those details, make the changes you've asked for, and have them come back one more time.
So we will continue this informal review to a later date when you've had an opportunity to prepare a final plan addressing.
Yeah, we'll come back with a full set of plans, showing snow storage, more landscaping, full drainage design, and, what we typically see for a site plan, so, of course.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our formal agenda for the evening. Any further business from the planning board? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned.